Joseph Murphy's central argument is that wealth does not begin in the external world, but in the inner world of the mind. He explains that every person operates through two levels of mind, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. The conscious mind is the part that chooses, reasons, and says, "I want to be successful," or "I want more money." However, Murphy stresses that this is only a small part of the whole mental system. The deeper and more powerful part is the subconscious mind, which stores emotional beliefs, past impressions, and repeated assumptions about life and money. According to this idea, a person's financial life is not simply the result of luck, the economy, or hard work alone. Instead, it is largely shaped by what the subconscious mind has accepted as true. If someone consciously wants wealth, but subconsciously believes they are unworthy, unlucky, or not the kind of person who has money, then the subconscious will continue producing behavior and expectations that match those hidden beliefs. In this sense, the subconscious mind becomes the silent architect of financial reality. It influences what opportunities a person notices, how confidently they act, and whether they move towards success or unconsciously sabotage it. The text uses the image of an iceberg to explain this clearly. The conscious mind is like the small visible tip above the water, while the subconscious is the much larger unseen mass below the surface. This means that most people fail to change their finances because they only work on the surface level, setting goals, making plans, or repeating positive words, without changing the deeper mental programs underneath. Murphy's message is that real financial change begins when a person rewrites the beliefs buried in the subconscious. Once the inner pattern changes, outer results can begin to change as well. Joseph Murphy suggests that many financial struggles do not begin in adulthood but much earlier, in childhood. Long before people earn, save, invest, or spend money on their own, they are already absorbing ideas about wealth from parents, relatives, school, culture, and everyday conversation. These early messages may sound simple or harmless, yet they often become permanent instructions in the subconscious mind. Phrases such as "money doesn't grow on trees," "we can't afford that," or "people like us are not meant to be rich" may be repeated so often that a child stops hearing them as opinions and starts accepting them as facts. Once these ideas are emotionally accepted, they become part of the inner blueprint that later shapes financial behavior. The text illustrates this through the story of a woman who worked hard, was capable, and earned money, yet somehow always returned to financial struggle. Raises disappeared, opportunities failed, and progress never lasted. Murphy explains this pattern not as bad luck, but as the effect of a buried belief formed in childhood. When she was young, she heard her father say that people like their family were simply not meant to have money. She accepted that statement at an impressionable age, and her subconscious spent years organizing her life around it. In other words, her outer financial pattern was only a reflection of an inner conclusion she had never questioned. This idea is important because it shifts the focus from blame to awareness. Murphy is not saying that childhood beliefs permanently trap a person, but he is arguing that they must first be recognized before they can be changed. A person may think they want abundance, while still carrying early emotional programming that associates money with impossibility, rejection, guilt, or exclusion. Those beliefs then influence choices, confidence, risk tolerance, and even what opportunities feel realistic. The result is that many people unknowingly recreate the financial atmosphere they first experienced as children. Murphy's message is that until these early beliefs are brought into the light, they continue working in the background as hidden limits on success. After explaining that financial beliefs are often formed in childhood, Murphy moves to a closely related point. Once limiting beliefs enter the subconscious, they begin to produce negative patterns of thinking in everyday life. These thoughts may seem small or ordinary, yet Murphy treats them as powerful instructions repeatedly given to the subconscious mind. Statements such as "I can't afford it," "money always disappears," "nothing ever works for me," or "I'll probably fail again" are not, in his view, harmless reactions to life. They are mental commands. The subconscious does not debate with them or try to correct them. It simply accepts them and works to make outer experience match inner expectation. This is why Murphy warns readers to be careful with habitual language about money. A person may say, "I can't afford that," as a quick expression of frustration, But if that idea is repeated often enough, it becomes part of a fixed inner identity. Over time, the mind begins to organize perception around shortage instead of possibility. The text even suggests that when people constantly affirm lack, they stop noticing opportunities that could improve their situation. Their attention narrows, their imagination weakens, and they begin to expect disappointment before anything has even happened. In that sense, negative thinking does not merely describe scarcity, it helps reproduce it. Murphy's broader point is that financial failure is often reinforced by the mental pictures people carry all day long. If the dominant image in the mind is one of struggle, debt, fear, or insufficiency, then the subconscious continues to support that image. A person may work hard outwardly, but inwardly they are still preparing for defeat. Negative thinking therefore acts like a hidden barrier between desire and achievement. It drains confidence, blocks initiative, and keeps the mind emotionally aligned with lack rather than growth. Murphy wants the reader to see that before abundance can be welcomed, the inner habit of expecting the worst must first be interrupted. The battle for wealth, in this view, begins with the discipline of refusing to mentally rehearse poverty. Murphy argues that one of the most destructive financial attitudes is not simple ignorance about money, but emotional conflict with it. Many people say they want wealth, yet deep inside they associate money with guilt, selfishness, pressure, or moral danger. They may have grown up hearing that rich people are greedy, that wanting more is shameful, or that money corrupts character. As a result, even when they consciously pursue financial improvement, another part of the mind resists it. Murphy sees this inner contradiction as a major reason why people sabotage their own progress. The subconscious cannot move fully towards something that the person has secretly labeled as wrong, threatening, or unspiritual. The text gives a clear example through the story of a doctor who constantly felt distressed whenever he paid bills. Even though he had a busy practice, he remained trapped in debt because every financial outflow felt to him like pain and loss. Murphy's interpretation is that he was not simply managing money poorly, he was emotionally charging every payment with resentment. In doing so, he kept reinforcing the belief that money was something hostile, something that wounded him whenever it moved. That mental and emotional pattern, repeated often enough, shaped his financial condition. Instead of seeing money as something that circulates, supports life, and returns through value, he experienced it as something being torn away from him. Murphy's solution is to remove this emotional poison from one's relationship with money. He encourages people to stop paying bills with anger, stop reacting to wealth with bitterness, and stop feeling ashamed for desiring prosperity. In the version you shared, he suggests blessing each payment and replacing inner resistance with gratitude. The point is not merely to sound positive, but to retrain the subconscious to associate money with order, confidence, and replenishment rather than fear. Once guilt and resentment begin to dissolve, the mind becomes more open to receiving, using, and circulating wealth in a healthier way. For Murphy, abundance requires not only new thoughts, but also a new emotional atmosphere around money itself. After clearing away guilt, fear, and resentment, Murphy asks the reader to rebuild their entire attitude toward money on a healthier foundation. In the text you shared, he makes the bold claim that money is good, spiritual, and constructive. What he means is not that money should be worshipped, but that it should no longer be treated as something dirty, shameful, or morally suspicious. Money, in his view, is simply a tool. It allows people to live with greater freedom, meet their needs, support their families, create comfort, develop their talents, and serve others more effectively. When seen this way, money is not the enemy of a meaningful life. It can be one of the instruments through which a meaningful life is expressed. Murphy's point is especially important because many people carry mixed messages about money. On one hand, they need it and work for it. On the other hand, they've been taught to distrust it or feel embarrassed by ambition. This split weakens the mind. If a person believes that money is somehow corrupting, then success may unconsciously feel dangerous. They may hesitate at opportunities, undercharge for their work, avoid growth, or experience anxiety whenever prosperity increases. Murphy argues that as long as money is linked to moral discomfort, the subconscious will continue pushing it away. To attract abundance, one must first become inwardly reconciled with the idea that wealth can be honorable, useful, and beneficial. This section therefore encourages a complete reinterpretation of wealth. Money should be welcomed with calmness rather than suspicion, appreciated rather than condemned, and treated as part of the natural flow of life. Murphy is not promoting greed, rather, he is challenging the belief that poverty is automatically pure and prosperity automatically corrupt. In his framework, healthy prosperity supports generosity, creativity, and service. The mind becomes stronger when it no longer apologizes for wanting a fuller life. Once money is accepted as a positive force, the reader is ready for the next major method in the book, using the imagination to plant a new financial reality in the subconscious. Murphy's next major idea is that the subconscious mind can be influenced through what he calls scientific imagination. This is not presented as idle fantasy or unrealistic daydreaming. Instead, it is described as a disciplined mental method for planting a new image of financial success deep into the mind. According to the text, the subconscious responds strongly to vivid inner pictures, especially when those pictures are repeated with feeling. If a person continually imagines failure, debt, rejection, or lack, the subconscious accepts those images as familiar reality. But if the person deliberately creates a clear mental picture of success, abundance, and achievement, the subconscious begins to move in that direction instead. The explanation in your text says that the subconscious does not clearly separate a vividly imagined experience from a real one when the image is emotionally convincing. That is why Murphy treats imagination as a serious force rather than a childish habit. He argues that when a person repeatedly imagines the fulfilled result of a financial goal, the mind starts to internalize the result as possible, natural, and expected. This changes more than mood. It affects confidence, attention, behavior, and the willingness to act when opportunities appear. In this way, imagination becomes a bridge between the inner world and the outer one. It gives the subconscious a destination to work toward. Murphy's larger point is that many people unconsciously use imagination against themselves. They rehearse worst-case scenarios, expect disappointment, and mentally replay failure before it happens. Scientific imagination reverses that process. Instead of allowing fear to dominate the inner screen, the reader is encouraged to construct a definite and desirable picture of prosperity already achieved. The more precise and emotionally convincing the picture becomes, the more powerfully influences the subconscious. In Murphy's framework, success does not begin when circumstances improve first. It begins when the mind stops picturing lack and starts consistently picturing fulfillment. Imagination, then, becomes one of the main tools for re-educating the subconscious toward wealth. Murphy does not stop at saying that imagination is important. He explains that imagination becomes effective only when it is joined with feeling. In the text you shared, he emphasizes that the subconscious responds most strongly not to dry mental pictures, but to images that are emotionally alive. A person may repeat positive ideas all day, but if those ideas feel empty, forced, or unbelieved, they do not penetrate deeply. By contrast, when a person imagines a desired result with joy, relief, gratitude, and conviction, that image becomes far more powerful. Emotion is what turns a picture into a command. It gives the subconscious something vivid enough to accept and work with. This is why Murphy recommends practicing visualization in a relaxed, drowsy state, especially before sleep. He describes this state as a moment when the conscious mind becomes quieter and the subconscious grows more receptive. In that condition, the reader is encouraged to imagine not the struggle of trying to get rich, but the final scene that would exist if the financial goal had already been achieved. It might be the feeling of shaking hands after closing a successful deal, receiving a promotion, depositing a large payment, or reading a letter offering a better position. What matters is that the scene feels specific, finished, and real. The person must not merely watch it like a movie, but emotionally enter it as if it were happening now. The example of the struggling salesman in your text illustrates this clearly. After a long period of financial disappointment, he was instructed to imagine, night after night, the experience of completing a successful sale and feeling the satisfaction that followed. Over time, this repeated inner rehearsal replaced his mental image of failure with a new expectation of success. Murphy's message is that emotionalized visualization reprograms the subconscious by making success familiar. Once the inner picture changes, behavior and response begin to change as well. The person becomes more confident, more attentive, and more aligned with the possibility of abundance. In this way, visualization is not presented as passive wishing, but as a disciplined method of internal transformation. Murphy introduces the law of circulation to explain that money, like many forces in life, is meant to move rather than remain trapped in fear. In the text you shared, he uses the contrast between a stagnant lake and a flowing river. A lake with no outlet eventually becomes still, polluted and lifeless, while a river remains fresh because water is constantly moving in and out. He applies this image directly to financial life. When people cling to money with anxiety, hoard it in fear, or resist any outflow as if loss were permanent, they create a kind of inner stagnation. Their relationship with wealth becomes narrow, defensive, and closed. Murphy argues that this mental state blocks abundance because it teaches the subconscious that life is based on shortage and self-protection rather than trust and replenishment. For Murphy, the principle of circulation is not just about generosity in a moral sense. It is about what generosity communicates to the subconscious. When a person gives, invests, shares, or pays with a spirit of trust rather than panic, they are sending a powerful signal inward. There is enough, life supports me, and more can come. In contrast, when every financial movement outward is charged with fear, resentment, or desperation, the subconscious absorbs the message that money is scarce and easily lost. Over time, this fear-based pattern shapes behavior, restricts vision, and reinforces the expectation of lack. Murphy therefore sees circulation as both a practical and psychological law. Outward movement reflects inward belief. This idea does not mean reckless spending or blind optimism. Rather, Murphy is encouraging a mindset in which money is treated as part of a living flow. Prosperity increases when people stop acting as if every payment is a wound and every act of giving is a threat to survival. In his framework, healthy circulation includes gratitude, confidence, and willingness to let resources move through life constructively. Once the mind accepts that receiving and releasing are both natural parts of abundance, financial energy becomes less fearful and more open. The person begins to live not from contraction, but from trust in continued supply. After explaining the law of circulation, Murphy turns to the role of work in attracting money. In the text you shared, prosperity is not presented as something that comes only from wishing, visualizing, or thinking positively. Instead, Murphy connects financial increase with the way a person approaches their daily work. He suggests that people prosper most naturally when they engage in the right work with the right attitude. Right work means more than simply having a job. It refers to work that uses one's abilities well, creates real value, and contributes something useful to other people. In Murphy's view, money follows service, usefulness, and excellence. When a person pours energy into work that genuinely meets human needs, prosperity becomes the natural return for value given. Equally important is the inner attitude brought to that work. Murphy repeatedly emphasizes that resentment, self-pity, boredom, and bitterness weaken the subconscious and reduce a person's ability to prosper. If someone sees work only as punishment or burden, they may perform outwardly, but inwardly they remain disconnected from growth. By contrast, when work is approached with dedication, care, and the desire to do something well, the subconscious begins to associate effort with achievement instead of frustration. This does not mean every job is ideal, nor that people must pretend to love every task. Rather, Murphy's point is that the spirit in which a person works matters greatly. Excellence, enthusiasm, and service-mindedness make the mind more constructive, focused, and open to advancement. This section also reinforces the idea that prosperity is not separate from contribution. Murphy does not frame wealth as selfish accumulation, but as the result of being aligned with useful action. The more a person develops their gifts and directs them toward meaningful service, the more naturally financial reward can follow. In this way, right work and right attitude become outward expressions of the inner abundance already being cultivated in the subconscious. A healthy money mindset is not passive. It leads to disciplined action, better performance, and greater readiness to step into larger opportunities when they appear. In the final movement of the text, Murphy brings all of his ideas together into one core message: financial freedom begins when a person consciously rewrites the beliefs that have been silently directing life from within. Throughout the book's summary, money problems are not treated as purely external issues caused only by luck, the economy, or other people. Instead, Murphy consistently returns to the idea that the subconscious mind acts according to what it has been taught to believe. If it has been trained through fear, guilt, limitation, and negative expectation, it will continue reproducing those patterns. But if those beliefs are replaced with new assumptions of worth, abundance, confidence, and possibility, then the direction of a person's life can begin to change. This is why the text ends not with a theory, but with a practice. The reader is urged to begin immediately, especially at night before sleep, when the mind is calm and receptive. Murphy's method is simple: relax, breathe, and build a clear inner scene of the financial life you desire as though it were already true. Feel the relief, gratitude, and confidence of that reality. Repeat the process consistently, without forcing results, and without judging too quickly. The purpose of this practice is not merely to feel better for a few minutes, but to replace old mental programming with a new inner standard. Over time, repeated emotionalized impressions begin to reshape what the subconscious accepts as normal. Once that inner norm changes, actions, decisions, and responses also begin to change. Murphy's final encouragement is deeply optimistic. He argues that people are not doomed by the beliefs they inherited from family, culture, or painful experience. They are not permanently trapped by old ideas of scarcity. The subconscious mind, though powerful, is also trainable. This means that poverty thinking is not destiny. It is programming, and programming can be rewritten. Lasting financial freedom therefore begins with an inner shift, no longer identifying with limitation, no longer speaking the language of defeat, and no longer accepting fear as truth. In Murphy's vision, prosperity grows when a person consistently aligns thought, feeling, imagination, and action with abundance. The outer financial life then becomes, little by little, a reflection of a newly transformed inner world.